Salve amici e benvenuti anche oggi per un nuovo video. Vediamo oggi l'ultimo episodio del documentario su Arc Raiders, sullo sviluppo e sul come si è arrivati proprio al punto in cui è andato il release. Nel primo episodio avevamo visto il grande cambiamento da un gioco pensato PvE, open world, addirittura quasi con gli eroi, al gioco attuale extraction shooter, quindi lo shift nel PvPE, dal solo PvE. Nel secondo la costruzione un po' del mondo in generale. In questo terzo episodio e ultimo, molto si focalizzerà appunto sulle macchine, sugli ARC e anche sull'intelligenza artificiale, che è uno dei fiori all'occhiello, a mio avviso, del gioco. Oltre al comparto audio e visivo e anche del gameplay, secondo me, ma sicuramente la parte della IA, di come è stata gestita e sviluppata, sarà qualcosa di interessante da vedere. Quindi questa è l'ultima parte di questo documentario, ce lo vediamo e GG.
Hello and welcome to the final video in our series on the development of Arc Raiders.
In the previous two episodes, we detailed how Arc Raiders changed from the fast-paced co-op giant machine hunting game to a more intimate and tactical PvPvE extraction shooter. But the dream of taking down large, intelligent machines never died. In fact, it may be the defining technology pillar of this entire project. I say maybe because for years Embark has been struggling to wrestle results out of this new tech. You see, early in Arc Raiders development, the team at Embark decided to make a gamble on an emerging technology, to make machines that would seem to move with intelligence. It's not AI in either the traditional gaming sense or in the new generative sense, but rather adopting breakthrough machine learning research in the field of real-world robotics.
Perfetto, questa era una cosa che già avevano detto in precedenza in altri piccoli spunti di contenuti sempre di Embark, però è sicuramente molto interessante. Quindi loro hanno fatto questa scommessa su un modo di sviluppare intelligenza artificiale non tanto con una IA generativa, ma più che altro appunto col machine learning, fare imparare agli ARC stessi dai loro errori e con le ripetizioni. È appunto un gambling, hanno detto, quindi una cosa che era diciamo così rischiosa, una scommessa, perché quasi nessuno l'aveva affrontata prima.
A way to allow the machines in this game, both large and small, to move realistically, allowing them to cross complex terrain, to react, fall, and stumble when under enemy fire, to walk, run, and jump even when one of their limbs has been blown off. I spend a lot of time talking to a lot of smart people to understand how exactly this technology works, the groundbreaking new game design language it opens up, and frankly how difficult it is to get any of this to work effectively. But before we get to any of that, let's first quickly remind ourselves about the machines that populate this world, instruments of the game's antagonist, Arc. We filmed these interviews in 2024, around a year before the game's release date, so much of what the interviewees are talking about has itself changed in the 12 months since.
What work is left to do, and how is Arc Raiders likely to evolve before it's released?
Quindi occhio che tutto quello che stiamo vedendo sono affermazioni addirittura di un anno prima della release. Chiaramente in un anno si evolvono anche le cose, quindi vediamo un po'. Molto interessante comunque.
Internally, we kind of broadly define the enemies into aerial enemies and ground enemies, just because of how we have to build them and how they behave tends to most cleanly fall into those two categories. And then within those categories, it tends to be like lighter enemies, fodder style enemies that, if ignored, they'll hurt you but aren't a tremendous deal to take down, up to much heavier enemies that are a significant threat to you and take a lot of effort. So on the low end of our aerial enemies, we have the Wasp, which is just a pretty light aerial drone that is somewhat erratic in its movement and has a light machine gun, and it will pepper you with bullets. And then its sort of big brother version is the Hornet, which has significant armor plating, which necessitates the player to either use maybe a type of grenade to take it out. They need to flank around behind it and take out its thrusters, which are unarmored. So the Rocketeer is an aerial enemy.
Va bene, stanno facendo una descrizione molto quasi da video YouTube dei vari arc, quindi divisi principalmente da terra e da aria, e poi i vari armamenti. Quindi per esempio il Wasp è leggero, è molto facile da abbattere, e invece per esempio il calabrone è più pesante, però ha solo i thruster davanti e armorizzati, quelli dietro invece più leggeri, è più difficile ovviamente da battere.
And it's kind of what it sounds like. It's just a very large aerial drone, fairly heavily armored, and will kind of
Nostro amico
saturate
Rocketeer.
areas of threat with rockets from a distance, so it kind of flushes players out.
If you want to just shoot for the center, maybe it takes a few more hits, but it's easier to hit, and each hit will kind of knock it back. So if it was getting ready to shoot at you, you can kind of throw its aim off just by knocking it a little bit. And that has always been the case. So there's always this concept of like a popcorn enemy, where it's like you get a lot of them and they don't take much damage to destroy, but it's like pop, pop, pop. It feels very satisfying.
And then our ground enemies
Molto
are
vero, molto
primarily
soddisfacente.
our answer to interior spaces, which again in Pio 1 weren't really a factor. It was a building you would run through at 50 kilometers an hour because our move speed was so high then it didn't matter. Whereas now you are slowed down and are interacting with containers, and we need a way to present threats to players in interior spaces. So we've gone through a lot of types in that area, but today we have what we just charmingly call the fireball, which is basically this metallic sphere that can roll quite easily in interiors, and then it opens up and shoots fire at you.
Giustamente questa è una descrizione molto specifica di tutti gli arc, o quasi tutti, anche perché questo, tra virgolette, documentario non è detto che lo veda per forza qualcuno che gioca il gioco, ok? Quindi se vi sembra eccessiva tutta questa descrizione, non lo è, perché giustamente se voi giocate ad Ark sapete benissimo cosa fanno tutti i vari Ark, ma se lo vedesse qualcuno che non ci gioca avrebbe molto senso spiegare queste cose. E quindi ora parla dei vari Ark a palla che popolano gli edifici negli interni.
The initial need was to have an enemy that was really fast and that could really catch up to players, right? Like we needed something that would be able to traverse our world in the game it's beautiful, but it has quite a lot of complex geometry, and there's all of this verticality and all of these slopes, and it's quite difficult for many ground moving enemies to navigate. So we were like, okay, we
Esatto.
need something that can be on the ground, but that can really go after players when they're like zooming around and jumping and
Questa è una cosa molto importante. Se giocate ai videogiochi avrete sempre notato quanto magari è difficile per le intelligenze artificiali, per gli NPC, per i nemici, avere un buon pathfinding nei vari ambienti. E quindi è molto importante il level design per facilitare questo pathfinding. E in questo gioco in realtà il level design è molto complesso, ci sono un sacco di asperità, e quindi devono cercare di trovare un modo per il quale i nemici non si incastrassero fondamentalmente, quindi riuscissero ad essere velocissimi e riuscire a navigare comunque in maniera intelligente il level design delle mappe
vaulting
fondamentalmente.
and going with their snap hooks and
Infatti
stuff.
le palle saltano.
And then we were like, oh, wait a second. A ball.
You don't need legs, you don't
You
need
don't need
wheels, you don't need
anything.
tracks,
It
just roll.
It just goes to where it needs to be, right?
We have
Ecco
another
perché
one
hanno
called
scelto le
Tick, which is
palle.
kind of a creepy little
Molto più
spider-ish
facile.
robot, and it can cling to walls and like hop off of them, and it will summon other enemies if you get close to them.
So the loot from the AI are the ones that are nicer. So like you find the core from one of the enemies, it's a grenade. There's an enemy that call other enemies. The piece of it does the same, so you can trap another player. Just like throw the thing and enemies will drop on them. So like we are trying to make you use of the loot that way.
Anche questo è molto intelligente, cioè il loot delle macchine doveva essere interessante e utile, cosa che perché è utile perché ha dei materiali che sono utilizzabili, ma soprattutto molti core, molti cuori meccanici a seconda del nemico sono direttamente degli oggetti utilizzabili. Alcuni vi servono per mettere gli scudi, anche se più deboli, altri sono delle granate esplosive, altre sono delle granate stordenti, altre delle esche. E lo sono già direttamente, appena luttate avete questo core che fa delle cose. È molto intelligente questa cosa a livello di design.
The first step on the journey to realistic machines is creating a world in which physics are accurate. Most games will animate their characters irrespective of the laws of physics, but if Embark was going to create a world in which intelligent robots could walk around as they saw fit, they had to ensure that laws like mass and gravity were consistent, that the world of Arc Raiders was capable of creating emergent moments between player machine, and environment.
Our enemies are fully physicalized. All parts, everything, they use physics to an extent that sometimes it's even a challenge. Because if we really want the drone to do a barrel roll, it can't because of their weight and the thrusters. All of that is super realistic in the game, right? So it's not easy to justify it doing a barrel roll. And all the parts of the drones as well can be peeled off, and the drone will actually react to that. If it has one thrusters left, it's going to try to shoot, and that it's going to impact its trajectory and all of that.
I think it's a choice between control versus emergence, really, because like, if you want to be able to say, like, look at a game like Dark Souls or something, Bloodborne, where they have these enemies that have really specific patterns, and it's like they want the player to learn, okay, after 3 seconds it's going to move to the left, and then it does this move which takes X amount of time, and then something else happens. If you want that kind of control, you cannot use physics.
Molto molto bello questo esempio rispetto per esempio ai Souls. Il fatto che tutti i nemici di Ark usino in maniera stringentissima la fisica, quindi sono costretti alle leggi che sono state imposte di gravità, fisica, azione e reazione, fa sì che siano più imprevedibili, ma anche che non possano fare tutto quello che vogliono. Se sono, per esempio, con un thruster in meno, 2 thruster in meno, non possono fare barrel roll, oppure sono più instabili. E questo è molto più divertente perché comunque rispecchia quello che poi noi viviamo nella vita di tutti i giorni, no? Al contrario, invece, i giochi che non hanno questo legame così stretto con la fisica chiaramente possono fregarsene e andare semplicemente sulle animazioni scriptate, che però i giocatori a un certo punto impareranno a memoria, no? E renderà tutto più leggibile e facile. Mentre su Ark Riders diciamo che ogni scontro è diverso per certi versi, soprattutto per quelli che volano, gli Ark che volano, perché effettivamente a seconda delle loro condizioni letteralmente fisiche avranno un comportamento di movimento diverso.
There's a lot of design philosophies, especially with enemy design, are really difficult to pull off when you have this type of systems, because it's so much about pattern recognition, right? Like you have an enemy moving in a certain way and like, oh, that's the opening for the attack, I can go in. Or you as a player know that like, if I do this, I'm gonna get this reaction from it, and that's gonna happen every time. And that's what games like Dark Souls, like Monster Hunter kind of rely upon. And we had this ambition to have boss fights in that same arena of like Dark Souls, Monster Hunter, like having all of that compelling pattern recognition. But then we also realized that, well, if you knock it in a certain way and the slope is a little bit angled and, you know, maybe someone else is standing somewhere else and firing off a grenade, then that is not going to work. You're not going to have the pattern that you thought.
Like if you've got a big enemy flying in the middle of a pack of smaller drones and you throw a grenade and it explodes, and then maybe one of the engines flies off and hits this other one, which then like crashes to the side. You get all of this stuff, kind of these cinematic moments that are really memorable, and that's not something anyone's designed as such. It's just something that's happened naturally, which is really cool. And like we thought
Fondamentalmente è la volontà del gioco di essere molto più sandbox, non solo nelle cose che uno può fare o non fare, ma proprio in come si fanno, quindi la fisica così tanto forte applicata anche sui nemici, i loro movimenti, i loro pezzi, fa sì che ci siano movimenti molto cinematici, e questo l'abbiamo visto tutti negli ultimi 2 mesi, quanti reel e storie e mini video che sono usciti allucinanti, super cinematici, perché sono sempre diversi, perché sono completamente randomici a seconda delle posizioni, dei nemici, della situazione, e questo rende il gioco molto più variegato di quello che potrebbe essere.
worth that.
Exactly.
Da questo punto di vista hanno
struggle with,
fatto
okay, maybe we
100.
don't get to do exactly what we want all the time,
Yeah.
but we get these cool, memorable moments that can just occur without anyone having planned them.
Getting physics to work for barrels or grenades is one thing. Getting physics to work for drones with parts that can be blown off is a whole other challenge. But getting physics to work for machines the size of buildings is an entirely different story. This is due to the nature of most game engines and physics simulations. Games are not used to calculating mass at that scale, and having enemies weighing thousands of tons creates challenges in how they move and interact within the world. Because sand in video games isn't sand, it's geometry, texture, and shaders. others, because rock and dirt doesn't crumble under the weight of heavy things in most games.
Inside the simulation, there are just numbers at work here. So the weights of things are there. So you set, this leg weighs 6 tons, or, the center of mass of this robot should be 10,000 kilos or something like that. But to get it to support its own weight, you have to set values on how much strength each limb has. And when you start dealing with like very, very insane numbers to try and support the thing, you get behaviors which are sort of uncanny. Very, very stiff legs that sort of like have a lot of energy, but they do small little inputs like this against the ground, and you get sort of like rigid bounciness happening. And if you want to dial that down...
quindi c'era all'inizio una dissonanza, perché questi nemici erano così grandi, però sembrava che si muovessero in maniera molto leggera, quindi era difficile dargli questo senso di pesantezza reale, di peso e di forza negli arti.
Then you get something that can't support itself and it starts to trip or fall over.
Vedete nelle prime build come si muovevano quasi
which was really hard
floating,
to find, to make it look natural,
volando,
but also give it the power to actually locomote.
galleggiando. Invece adesso si sente molto di più la fisicità di quelli grossi in
It is a
particolare.
classic game issue that when you have physics, they are not penetrating each other, right? You have things and it's resting on top of something. You don't get it buried deep beneath, right?
Non
And
c'è,
if we're
sì.
talking about these big bosses, they would bury themselves into concrete or anything, right? Not just sand.
Cioè lo dicono quando si fa un gioco con questa fisica così pesante, le superfici non possono, diciamo così, attraversarsi tra di loro, ma devono rimanere una sull'altra. E questa cosa è molto più
But you
difficile.
can't really
Quanti
do that
giochi
in
hanno
games
questi
without
bug,
a
diciamo,
lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, it really breaks the illusion when you want to see like an
Di superfici che si
foot kind
intersecano,
of like come towards Luke's speeder and go, and that doesn't happen. What happens is it kind of goes like this, and you're kind of like, huh. I thought this thing was supposed to be huge and big, right? It just doesn't sell it.
Early in the development of Arc Raiders, the team at Embark decided to establish a team to explore the possibility of using groundbreaking research in the field of robotics to enable the enemies to locomote independently of any preset animations. Decision-making would be made using game logic, but how a machine got from A to B would be decided by a brain, generated using machine learning.
You know those Boston Dynamics videos where they try and teach a bipedal robot how to jump up on a box? That's kind of like what Arc Raiders is trying to do, but instead their robots are way bigger and they have way more legs. And crucially, they have to be able to do something that traditional games can't. And that's when you blow off one of those legs, those robots have to be able to adapt.
I think, as I've been told,
Quindi hanno preso delle tecnologie che usavano anche Boston Dynamics, che fanno i robot praticamente. Con la differenza che qua i robot hanno molte più zampe e quindi è ancora più difficile calcolare questa cosa, nonché si devono anche adattare, perché a volte potrebbero perdere un arto e comunque devono continuare a muoversi in maniera coerente. E tutto questo è stato possibile solamente con un uso massiccio di machine learning.
like their objectives has been much closer to the same objectives as Boston Dynamics has, rather than game design problems of like literally figuring out how these machines will navigate with their own vision, and like they had to be physically accurate also, where you put the engines and the downwash and all that has to be accurately, they have to be in accurate locations for it to work. Like what's exciting and what's still exciting is the fact that using this technology for our locomotion system is the losing limbs and still it wants to stand up.
Direi che l'Hyper è proprio l'esempio
to
calzante.
the imagination of what is self-preservance, like, and how that speaks back to the players. So to us, that when we saw that, at least, that is an exciting prospect of a new type of experience that players haven't had before, I think. They're literally playing against a machine.
The ML only did at that point locomotion. So that was responsible to make it go from point A to B, and that's it. No ML in decision making whatsoever. So it depends a little bit on the model. So some models consume a lot of memory. That is maybe the biggest consideration. And some language models and such consume gigabytes of memory. But this locomotion does not consume that much. So I'd say the expensive part of ML is what we call observations. And that is actually not really ML per se, that is just how the agents get information about the world. So they don't see the world the way a player sees it, of course. They have to, if they want to see a wall, you have to sort of line trace or do a shape cast to see it or detect it. And we need to do a lot of those, maybe thousands, so they get an idea of what kind of environment they are in. At least this is the case for locomotion.
The road to getting this locomotion system to work has been long and difficult, and it involves several different stakeholders from within the team, from animators to technical animators, artists and gameplay engineers. It also required the studio to look outside into the world of research.
I did my PhD in mathematics and thought pure mathematics was a bit too dry, so then I found...
Quindi hanno dovuto pescare anche al di fuori dall'ambito classico delle figure di sviluppo del gaming, per cercare di trovare una quadra su questa questione di far muovere gli ARC con questa machine learning e in maniera che avesse un senso. Perché chiaramente, come ho detto prima, non è che ovviamente gli ARC vedono le cose come vediamo noi umani, no? Devi mettergli tutti quei paletti di muri, ostacoli, tutto quanto, e loro devono comprendere le cose in un certo modo diverso e adattarsi a tutto questo. Quindi, per esempio, questo c'ha il PhD in matematica.
Applications and the application I found was applying machine learning to biology. So I worked on hereditary diseases like diabetes and Crohn's disease and stuff like that, and tried to identify the target genes that were involved with that through machine learning. Like, it's completely revolutionized the field. I think there's very soon we will see a Nobel Prize to DeepMind, Google DeepMind, for their work on biology applications of machine learning. Like, I'm certain of it, yeah.
Really early on we had, there was a test where even though the gait, so the way it walked, was kind of meh, we threw boxes at it. So we were just throwing these, I think there were 100-kilogram boxes, and it just reacted, and that's when you see, holy shit, there's a magic here. From an animation perspective, I'm used to, okay, how would I break this down into, let's say, a sequence of animations that can, in this case, it would be, we can throw a box at this from any angle, in any direction, in any weight or whatever. And I'm thinking of the animation complexity, so, well, how do I handle arbitrary complexity? Well, then I need to have infinite amount of animations or blending, and that is just a nightmare, which is why you often see things like, if I punch you in the shoulder in a video game, you just do this, cave-in animation, or, the can sequence.
And a funny thing with this tech, I think, is that it's kind of partially ruined animations in other games for me a little bit. So now when I look at other games, I'm like, wait, the center of gravity is off here. Like, this doesn't feel right anymore, and it really annoys.
Qui dicono il problema è proprio che generalmente nei videogiochi a volte ci sono delle dissonanze tra l'azione e la reazione, no? Dei corpi, perché sono delle animazioni super limitate, no? L'animatore ne ha fatte un tot e quelle utilizzano, e questo non era bello né funzionale, e quindi in realtà ora penso ci spiegheranno che appunto con questo machine learning diciamo che le animazioni non sono fisse, cioè sono conseguenziali alle azioni, che era una cosa magari facile da pensare, difficile da fare. Ecco.
A connoisseur of animation, I hear.
But everything else they do looks so good. Like when they walk like on a flat ground, like that's an authored animation cycle that looks really good, and an animator's been like, I want to convey this sense of weight, this sense of menace in this gait, or like this sense of joy or whatever. And we just take whatever the robots give us, and it looks frequently kind of shitty in comparison to these like Disney walks, right? Yeah. But on the other hand, when you throw something at it, or when it slips, or when the ground is not even, our robots do the right stuff. Mm-hmm. And their robots are not robots. They don't do the right stuff. They just like apply some kind of one out of their 20 animations that they have, and it doesn't fit.
The process of training these brains is complicated. It essentially requires somebody to give the brain certain conditions, have it train using those conditions, and then testing the brain in a machine and seeing what it does right and what it does wrong. An example of a condition could be if an enemy is far away, run fast to get to them, or if a human enemy is firing at you, attempt to jump over them. The core problem with this work is that once one of the brains is baked, you can't simply tweak its behavior. You have to go back to the original conditions, retrain the entire brain, and then test to see if the new brain works better. And this causes a problem because the solutions that a human might have can be very different to the solutions these robot brains come up with.
We found some fun at playing against the big ML enemies, right? And the problem was to replicate that fun. It was very difficult because it's not predictable. It's very hard to just say, do this, right? It doesn't follow orders that way. You have to train it and teach it, and sometimes it finds weird ways to get to do things more efficiently, like removing all the legs but 2 from the ground because that's faster for it. But then it looks silly. It doesn't become a menacing enemy that we wanted, right? So we always had that dilemma dealing with ML that is not the predictability part of it.
The damn agent learned that if I just shove my foot into the ground really hard, faster than the server can keep up, I can use the penetration to bounce myself, right?
A typical example was that we give it a cookie when it reaches or when it moves towards a flag, right? Yeah. And when it gets to the flag, we move the flag to a new place, right? At some point in time, we try to train it, like the closer it was to the flag, the bigger the reward it got, like the better the cookie, right? And what it learned, of course, was that it runs up to the flag and then stops, like with its nose, like this close to the damn thing. And it's like, I know if I touch it, it goes away and stuff starts hurting. Like that's much worse. Oh but you're touching something that I think has been a huge problem, which is the interaction between game designers and the ML loop. Like that's been really hard. Yeah. For a long time, I felt like the game designers would ask us something, and we think that's possible. Let us get back to you. And then 3 months later, we'd be like, yeah, now we have the Stomp attack request, and they're like, oh, we worked around that now.
The team at Embark has tackled these issues with a number of solutions, one being training the brains on actual animation data to help guide their movement, almost like giving the brain a template to work from. And another has been, instead of baking one brain for each machine, giving them multiple brains that focus on specific tasks. This in particular has proved helpful for both getting the machines to work properly and empowering developers in how they tweak machine behavior.
And I think it's only fairly recently that we've managed to get the locomotion components we've been working on predictable and diverse enough that they feel like they have building blocks that they can use by themselves instead of involving us in every single step. They can be like, okay, I know I have the stop behavior, I have the patrol behavior, I have the assault behavior, and I have the melee behavior. Now I can combine these as I want to and create good game design with it.
As you've probably talked about, it's very tricky to get ML to do things with extreme intent, and we've tended to try to ask it to do jobs it's bad at, which is telegraph and attack with precision. So trying to work through those problems where we've got this thing that walks very competently across complex terrain. How do we turn that into a game loop that feels satisfying?
Like our reinforcement learning and machine learning efforts into locomotion is something that is being used today to some extent, maybe not to the full extent that we were hoping as we started, and that proved to be far more difficult than we expected. But
insomma, è una roba molto molto complessa, perché c'era un miscuglio di interessi diversi tra quelli del design del gioco e come funziona tutto questo rinforzo di machine learning, che non era facilmente prevedibile. Tant'è che lì dicono, sì, effettivamente una volta che tu cuoci un cervello e quello sa fare, ha imparato in un certo modo, si è migliorato in un certo modo, se poi a te non va bene lo devi resettare, praticamente farne un altro, non puoi più modificarlo. E quindi, insomma, con varissimi e tantissimi tentativi sono arrivati a un po' una quadra di avere dei atteggiamenti generali, quindi non avere un IA, un cervello tra virgolette per ogni arc, ma un atteggiamento di aggressione, essere più aggressivi oppure essere in patrol, quindi di guardia, oppure in una situazione di attenzione, e riuscire comunque a delimitare questi atteggiamenti che sono arrivati comunque da un sacco di esperimenti e ripetizioni di machine learning e usare questi blocchi per gestirli, e in questo modo chi poi deve fare il design degli ambienti, delle interazioni e tutto quanto, riesce a utilizzare questi blocchi, diciamo, per far sì che tutto abbia un senso, che non sia poi troppo sconnesso dall'idea generale. Insomma, una roba complicatissima. Però devo dire che l'effetto finale è notevolissimo, perché è una delle cose che si notano di più del gioco, secondo me.
We are using it today. It's a part of the game and it makes the game feel very different than any other game. And that technology will evolve over time. So we were just a little bit too early with it and didn't maybe have enough resources and knowledge to figure it out at the time.
I think we are getting to a point now where we are getting more and more comfortable with it. So that's why we want to keep it. It's still an ambition. That's why we all...
E quindi siamo all'inizio, perché immaginatevi che è una cosa abbastanza innovativa, non è che hanno inventato loro, ma forse quasi, e quindi siamo comunque a una versione proprio iniziale, che funziona, però può essere migliorata molto di più in realtà.
Always have at least one enemy in the game with it, but it is much more complicated. We just did a new prototype of one big enemy like those without machine learning, with procedural animation, and it got the results, as I said, like I can say just stop there, put the leg here, and do things like that. It was much simpler to produce. But we had a couple animators full-time on it for 6 months. Right. So that's the trade-off there. Yeah.
Arc Raiders is launching into one of the least predictable video game markets ever, where players demand exciting new experiences that they can play with their friends for days, weeks, and months at a time. But this reality hasn't stopped Embark from taking bold risks when it comes to gameplay or technology. In both Arc Raiders and the finals, it's clear to see how much of a thirst the studio has for evolving any given genre, even if it takes years of experimenting. And while I've been embedded in the development of Arc Raiders, it's also been clear to me that they're not scared to tear up lukewarm ideas that don't reach their lofty goals. Time will tell what type of audience Arc Raiders ultimately receives. We produced these videos long before the game's release. But one thing is for sure, no matter how Arc Raiders launches, in Embark's hands this game is going to continue to evolve, to take risks, and to push technology and, more importantly, gameplay forward.
Ragazzi, questo è veramente super interessante, perché praticamente vuol dire che siamo solo agli inizi, comunque stanno continuando a sviluppare questa tecnologia e chissà quali nuove cose ci attenderanno negli anni futuri, a che nuove vette riusciranno ad arrivare, sia come nuovi arc, ma proprio come questa nuova tecnologia che rende comunque molto più vivo e interattivo e realistico l'interazione con l'intelligenza artificiale, fondamentalmente i nemici, gli NPC. E magari altri studi di sviluppo prenderanno spunto, segneranno, ruberanno, copieranno, e magari riusciremo ad avere giochi più interessanti, con IA più interessanti nei prossimi magari 10 anni. Tutto questo grazie a questo lavoro degli sviluppatori di Embark e di Arc Raiders. Quindi speriamo di sì, speriamo che questo sia il futuro, perché sarebbe una grossa evoluzione dal punto di vista, diciamo, del PvE nei videogiochi. E il video fondamentalmente è finito, il documentario è finito, quindi è stato molto bello, molto istruttivo, molto interessante secondo me vedere questi 3 episodi, e sono contento di averli riportati anche con dei miei commenti in diretta, tra virgolette. Quindi grazie di aver visto tutti questi 3 episodi, fatemi sapere tutto quello che volete sotto nei commenti, ovviamente. Noi ci becchiamo comunque prossimamente in questa playlist per tutti i video su Arc Raiders e nel resto del canale per il resto del gaming. State bene come sempre, ci becchiamo alla prossima, ciao ciao.